even the villain in the story. I mean, how many times have you read a book, or seen even a program where the person is really despicable and you have a sneaking admiration for that person? It's this cathartic, emotional experience that calls forth all of our human emotions. And what's great about whether it's the heroes are most interesting if they're flawed, and that was even the Greeks knew that their most venerated heroes had flaws, like Achilles. We use the expression Achilles heel. Does anybody know why? Yes, do you know why?
Because didn't his mom like dip him in something, in some like magical thing, and she was holding him by his heel, and then like he was in a battle and got shot.
Right, the siege of Troy.
Yeah.
And he got shot with an arrow in that one spot. So even the Greeks, over 2,000 years ago, understood that it's boring to have a hero that's perfect and wonderful and beautiful. Achilles was described as the most beautiful man of his age, and he had muscles, and he was the greatest warrior. Yeah. Boring. What made him enduring, and 2,000 years later we still talk about Achilles because he had a flaw. The same thing with a villain. Villains, the most effective villains, are the ones that we do have a sneaking admiration for because they're smart. They outwit the law enforcement agencies, or they're clever, or they prey on people that we would never admit to disliking. The outcasts, the people who are weak, who we can, again, that cathartic sense of exercising. So in terms of character development, they're shades of gray. The best characters are the ones that have all gradations of strengths and weaknesses. And here's where writing is. So I sat down at my desk and pushed up my sleeves and thought, how hard can this be? I know the story pretty well. And that started a 5-year journey. It took me 5 years to finish writing the book and researching, because I was basically teaching myself. But I knew what I liked. I knew the books that I liked, and oftentimes as a writer, you're going to end up writing in a similar style or in a similar vein with similar narrative techniques to the stuff that you like to read, because that's what's feeding you. That's what's feeding your creativity. So if you're writing historical fiction, or if you're writing contemporary fiction, or if you're writing parody, oftentimes the best way to get started is to read what it is that you're trying to do. And instead of teaching you to copy, it helps to inform to you what works and what doesn't work. So the first thing I would say is to read everything you can of the ways in which you would like to write yourself. That sounds pretty obvious, but a lot of times people will say, no, I don't want to read anything because I want my idea to be original, and I don't want it to be polluted. Well, again, nothing original under the sun. And what you're doing is you're feeding that creativity. Some of the things sound pretty obvious, will sound completely inane and obvious, but every writing idea project starts off with an idea. It may be a dream, it may be something you've witnessed on the street. You watch somebody get struck by a car, it sets off a chain of events. For Marcel Proust, very famous French artist, it was the Madeleine, it was the cookie. Biting into the cookie, the flavor brought floods of childhood memories back that he had forgotten or that he had pushed away. So you never know what is going to spur that idea. And it may just be a snippet of conversation that you overhear. It may be something, just an image of the red chair in your brain. But it starts with that idea, and it's the idea that doesn't let go. And I would encourage all of you that if you get an idea, I travel with notebooks in my car, next to my bed. I have little notebooks everywhere, so that if I get a snatch of conversation, a piece of narration, just an idea, especially when you wake up in the morning. You know, a lot of times the best idea is you wake up and you go, light bulb goes off, write it down, because it's very ephemeral, and you think, wow, this is a great idea, I'm going to remember it. You may not remember it. I mean, you guys are under so much stress right now with school, with sports, with social media. If you get an idea and it sparks this, you know, prickles the hair on the back of your neck, or it finds that you find that you're captured by that idea, write it down. But it's not necessarily very interesting. What makes a story interesting is the tension that this character who's going to work and who hates his boss and everything is going wrong, his car breaks down, and then he gets a big tax bill from the government, and then he gets a pink slip, and then all of these things that are life, though, are building up, causing tension. And you're taking a rubber band, and if I were to stand here with a rubber band as I'm talking and just pull it tighter and tighter and tighter, after a while, you wouldn't be necessarily listening to just my words. You would be watching the rubber band thinking, when's it going to break? And is it going to pop off and hit me in the eye, or is it going to pop her in the face? And writing tension, it's what makes the reader go along for the ride is this internal tension. And it can be anything. It can be something big like a war, or it can be the internal war, the conflicts, our own demons that we have to fight. You know, before Mr. Cantor was talking about serial killers in the class before, reading A Clockwork Orange. Now, if you're writing about a serial killer, the tension is pretty obvious. It's going to be, you know, the tension inherent in the guy's going to get someone and kill them. But what makes it more interesting is if you see from the beginning the internal struggle that this serial killer is going through. Is this serial killer, he or she, completely without conscience, completely amoral? Or, as is often the case, is this someone who people say later, he was such a nice guy, he was so quiet, I worked next to him for 20 years. So it's the internal tension building up, and your character doesn't have to be a serial killer to be effective, but it's showing the inner mind. And what that means is getting your own internal voice, a stream of consciousness, down on paper. Writing has changed a lot over the last few hundred years. And for those of you who are reading Shakespeare, it was different language. It's not necessarily easy to read in the beginning. And then through the 1800s, the language was very flowery, it was very descriptive, and there were a lot of descriptions on who, what, when, and where. For us, exactly.